sort of give a sense of what I was thinking of when I thought about this issue of the book collection. For those of you who know, I've been working quite closely in the school libraries, and we do have really issues on the ground, but as well as, the idea that we are moving forward and there are some concrete things that we want to be doing. Okay, so moving ahead, how do we then develop a future-ready school library collection for adolescents? And I think the word here is, how can we prepare for the future? How can we have a policy? How can we find a way to stock the books and think about what we are doing so that it will be future ready? Our students 5 years from now will know what to do, and will find the library a vibrant place. So I go back to this kind of 3 ideas that I started out with at the beginning. And I think it's important to get these 3 ideas right because, I was just asking myself, I went to the Harbourfront Library on Saturday, and like I said, it was a wonderful library. So I began to ask myself, I said, what's the difference between my student going to the Harbourfront Library and my student coming to the school library? And when we clarify the purpose of the school library, then I think we can begin to start working on our collection. So first, encourage engaged reading. Second, provide pedagogical support. And third, inspire independent learning. So take these as my suggestions. Okay, so what are some ways we can think about encouraging engaged reading? So engaged reading, note, means that the students are independent and self-motivated. They're going to walk into your library and they're going to pick up a book and they're going to sit there and they're going to flip through the pages and think about finishing it. Or if they don't like it, there'll be another book they can get there, and there'll be books for different kinds of students. Now, if engaged reading is the aim, then you will stock your books so that your readers will come in voluntarily and borrow those books. So I think this point I brought up quite often. Concentrate on the quality of the print collection before focusing on increasing the quantity of the collection. As we know from our research at Commonwealth, it's better to have fewer books if the books are all new, because the loan rates will go up. Because when you have fewer books, students end up seeing the newer books. A bit like Marie Kondo, When you start decluttering, you begin to be able to see what you actually have and use them. And then I'm condoing here, then you must categorize your mess, and then you know where everything is. Okay, so concentrate on the quality of the books first, and that includes weeding as a first policy, and then focus on increasing the quantity of things that work. Secondly, consider a variety of texts. I think we are often bound up when we think about books, we really literally just think about books. And for most of us who are English and mother tongue teachers, when we think about books, we think novels, And then if you're a literature teacher like me, even worse, literary novels. Anything that seems remotely trashy, you won't include. But I think we need to think about texts differently. We need to consider magazines. That's big. The kids really move magazines. I highly support having lots of magazines in the library. In our research, when we go down to primary schools, we see the kids reading Young Scientists. They don't care what issue it is. They have 60 copies of Young Scientists during recess. 60 copies of Young Scientists will be read by the students during recess. And these short readings are readings. And magazines are up to date. They give you just in time, right? They are not just in case. Okay, so magazines are great for that. Picture books, we have seen at Commonwealth where they have stock picture books that kids like to look at the picture books even though they are teen readers. Okay, picture books can be instructive, they can be interactive. There is Jane Austen picture books as well. So, you can be literary and stretch students in that way. Biographies, the human interest is a big factor. Boys may like sports. You can include sports biographies. Think about the people that your students will read. You may, in your collection policy, think about whether these kinds of lifestyles are encouraged. And other than the Lee Kuan Yew kind of like founders type of biographies, there are really a lot of inspirational biographies out there. Scientists, historians, geographers, there are a lot of books. And for biographies, there are picture books as well. And graphic novels, big section. Carve out a big section for graphic novels and comics. Advertise books, I can't emphasize this enough, by organizing the library, purchasing the right furniture, and bringing books out of the library. So one of the things you see outside there that Queensway has done is that they actually move their shelves against the wall for their fiction collection. And like I mentioned just now, they have weeded the collection. So the books are more visible. So now the next task that we need to do is to help with stocking up the collection and to think about genrefying it. But if the books are obvious and visible, kids are more likely to borrow. Purchasing the right furniture, if you're looking at furniture, which height? I've been to a primary school library where the books the kids would borrow are right on top of the shelves. So the kids can't actually reach the book. So these are very practical decisions, but we need to take them into account. And bringing books out of the library, whether it's through a mobile card or just advertising them, having your teachers talk about what they're reading, having students talk about what they're reading, recommending the book you're reading in your classroom. One of the suggestions that I've often made, I don't know how many schools have taken it up, but I always say, you have professional development, right? And then, as the whole committee, you're reading books about leadership. Why don't you just read young adult novels, English department? And at your next meeting, you have 10 people in your department, you will have 10 recommendations. And the rule is you don't have to finish it. You can come and say, I tried reading this, but I don't like it. And this is why. And you're generating that kind of information, and this is professional development, because with this kind of information, your teachers can go to the classrooms and share it with their students. Make available through the public library bestsellers that appeal to adolescents. Okay, so this is just an idea. Okay, when Crazy Rich Asians came out, it just won Best Comedy, right? NLB said anybody can borrow Crazy Rich Asians, the e-version. So my suggestion is this. I was at Harbourfront and they had these screens and you could scan the QR code and you could borrow the book immediately. It was pretty seamless. I just had to log in. So why don't we select like the 10 most favorite books? Okay, no such thing as most favorite, but the 10 favorite books, and no, maybe not 10 favorite books, maybe 5 favorite books and 5 books we like to promote. And can we have a more unlimited access to it? And then see if our kids will borrow those ebooks from NLB. Okay, so that's just my suggestion. Providing pedagogical support. So we must remember that the library is a place for teachers and for students. One of the things we noticed in Commonwealth was because the teachers found the library interesting and exciting, they could use it for discussion, they started using the library more. And when they used the library more, the students got more opportunity to go in, and the students went to the library more as well. So don't forget the teachers. Okay, provide pedagogical support by expanding teachers' resources, including magazines, online resources, and multimodal or subscription resources. When I began teaching, I was quite fortunate. I started teaching in RGS, where we had very good mentors, and we had an excellent library where they had a lot of resources for teachers. So I was going down to the library and borrowing books. And I think the tendency sometimes is for the books to be kept out of the library. So I wonder if, we can think about the library as a place to provide pedagogical support for teachers and include resources for teachers. And I've been to school where they say, it's okay if the students want to read it. In fact, I'll be quite excited if they want to read my materials. Consult subject teachers for books and e-resources that can support student learning. That's one of the things we've been talking about. We need to get the subject teachers involved. So if you have a committee in your school, it shouldn't just consist of the English department and the mother tongue department. It needs to include other subject teachers or ways to reach out to them and say, can you help me with ordering this? And we need to set some structures in place for helping. Make visible these resources by providing guides, one-click access, large and clear signage. I know that at St. Nicholas, they had a pilot with NLB where they have a one search and you can access both the NLB system together with the school, whatever resources they have in school. I'm not sure how that's happening, so we'll wait for St. Nick's to update us. But the idea here is one click, I can get all my resources. Or one look, I look over there and I know all the history books are there. So signage needs to be large and it needs to be attractive. Create specialized collections unique to the niche or strength of the school and share these collections within the cluster. I think the first one is not new, specialized collections. So if you have an ALP or LLP, the thought of redoing your entire library is just enough to make anybody crash and think, I can't do it. But I think if you start with, I only have to do the specialized collection, I create a section for it, and I order books according to, say, robotics or according to STEM, it might make the task a bit easier, and it feeds in with your ALP. And I wonder whether you then can get funds from other places because it ties in with what your school is doing. And the sharing these collections within the cluster, I'm not sure whether that's a feasible idea, but let's say one cluster is a STEM school, another cluster is an arts school. You know they have a specialized collection. If it's really good, could you just let other people know, hey, if your students want to come over, please feel free to take a walk and come over and you can share my resources. Okay, third one is inspire independent learning. And I think this is pretty important in terms of the whole sort of emphasis on learning for life. Okay, so we want the students to be able to learn by themselves. And usually secondary school is really the place for them to begin. But in terms of learning for themselves, I think we want to move away from the idea that it's only studying. The library is important for studying. And when we started our research here in Queensway, we found that the school was supporting the students by providing even resources like assessment books that students may not be able to afford and worksheets so that the students could come here and having longer hours. So I think studying is one way of learning. But in terms of collaborative spaces, can students come into the library to discuss? If they wanted to discuss something, would the whiteboard be available for them? Do they have the kinds of stationery they need? Do they have the computer systems? Do they have things that they need for independent learning? So some things we can do. Focus on the research capacity of the school library by building on the non-fiction and e-resources of the library. I think that is a big question we need to really engage with that I don't have the answer to myself as to how exactly to manage this huge task. But we know that nonfiction is important and the e-resources are important. So we need to make it accessible and help students to access them. Another suggestion, could we then work with project work and subject teachers to determine collections and skills required for projects and purchase resources based on these needs? Notice I put skills because, for example, you may want your students to do research. You may have the books in the library, but if the students don't know the book is in the library, they don't know how to use these books, then the books are still going to remain in the library. Joanna was sharing with me that just last week she was running workshops for the students in terms of how to do research, very specific for very specific subjects. You know, the teachers come to her and they say, okay, we need help for history. This is my class. The students can sign up for consultation with her. Now, we might not be able to do it in our schools because we are all teaching, but we don't just determine the collection. We ask ourselves, what is the skill that is required for the student to use the collection? Then how do we provision it either within the classroom or outside? Provide books and resources that inspire students to read or learn more. I like what Jane talked about when she gave that category and there were browsable books. I have another category, I call them inspirational books. They're just there, they're beautiful, but they're also things that can inspire you to do things or want to do something. So we observe that when there are nice books in the library, they're good books, students come in and they browse. And it doesn't show up on the loan rate because these books are too thick to loan home. But you know, the fact that the student has sat there, looked at a design book and thought about something, they are learning something. Finally, provide physical discussion or collaboration spaces and technological resources, including specialized computers in the library for student utilization. So, you know, within this library, one of the things that Queensway has done to provide a collaboration space as a sort of minor hack is that they've cordoned off, well, not cordoned, they've divided this library into this area outside where the food was served, and there's whiteboard and there's space, and because of the layout of the library, students can actually be a bit noisy inside here compared to the other half of the library. In some other spaces, they have built discussion rooms for students, but there are different ways to do it. But I think we need to remember about the technological resources. And by technology, I do not mean computers. Okay, we need to think about old technology and new technology. By technology, I refer to whiteboards, I refer to markers, I refer to computers, I refer to iPads. So in thinking about that independent learning, we want to ask ourselves, for the student who's coming into the room, who wants to brainstorm, discuss, and then type things out, do we have all the resources available within the room for the students to move across these different sort of technologies seamlessly? and to work with this. So I suppose these are sort of like my 4 suggestions. So I don't have a collection statement. I think it takes a lot more time to work. But I thought I'll just write this to inspire us and get us thinking a little bit. My future-ready school library will build up the collection to encourage engaged reading, provide pedagogical support, and inspire independent learning for both teachers and students, sort of as the broad statement. And if I could just ask you to just take 2 minutes, take a piece of paper from the table and jot down for yourself what are some of the things you can do in your own library. Could I just ask you to do that just to generate the thinking? You don't have to focus on all. You can decide you want to focus. My library can support engaged reading in terms of the collection by doing whatever. Or you can say my library can provide pedagogical support by give a point. Or my library can inspire independent learning. So maybe